Good evening to you. The BBC stopped short of apologising for its Glastonbury horror show, but it should probably reconsider that decision after what I'm about to tell you tonight. I know some viewers at home have asked for the clip not to be played again on television, but I believe sunlight is actually the best disinfectant. And personally, I'm not in the game of censorship.
Death, death to the IDF! Death, death to the IDF! Death, death to the IDF! Death, death to the IDF!
The BBC said some of the comments made during that Bob Vylan set were, quote, deeply offensive. But the corporation hasn't addressed why it continued to broadcast the live feed to the nation when it could have easily pulled the plug. It also hasn't answered why there wasn't at least a delay on the transmission that would have allowed them to react to it. They could have done it because the BBC had already decided that Irish band Kneecap shouldn't have been given the time of day, and their performance at Glastonbury was right after Bob Vylan's. And that's exactly what the BBC should have done, because, as I've discovered over the past 24 hours, the Beeb knows Bob Vylan very, very well. Ben Leo tonight can reveal the BBC's been championing Bob Vylan's lead singer as far back as 2006. His real name is Pascal Robinson Foster. He's a 34-year-old from Ipswich. This is Pascal, featured on the BBC website in April 2006 under its old Video Nation segment, and it described him as a performance poet. It reads, Pascal believes poetry can have a powerful message. He tells us about his influences and why he loves slam poetry. Very good. Robinson Foster has also previously spoken about his band's struggles to get signed by a label because they're just too extreme. And he seems to have a penchant for violent threats too. This is him from a gig in Manchester where he told a heckling audience member that he'll meet him outside to punch him.
I'll have you on your ass in no time, you Tell you what, buy a ticket to the show at the Ritz, I'll meet you outside and punch you up there, you
Yeah, of course you will. One of Bob Vylan's tracks is called Makes Me Violent. Another track, called Rain, has the lyrics, got a message for the thieves in the palace, we want the jewels back. And on another track, Get Yourself a Gun, Robinson Foster sings, landlord just raised your rent, mate, get yourself a gun. The BBC should have known all of this, of course. If it didn't, it certainly should have known that in 2022, Bob Vylan performed their track Wicked and Bad in the BBC's very own studio as part of its coverage of Glastonbury that year. In that performance, Robinson Foster raps about digging up the grave of Margaret Thatcher.
Wicked and bad, man move. Moving wicked and bad, put the money in the back. What the graveyard man moves, got Maggie, let's go dig up Maggie's grave. Ask her where that milk went. Down to storm those down indoors, run inside and eat the rich before they turn eat your children.
So let's remind ourselves, shall we? The BBC knew about this nut job and his bandmate in 2006. They hosted him in their studios in 2022, and yet they still decided to let him run riot in 2025 without even bothering to think about putting a delay on the feed. Can you imagine for a second if GBNews did that? You'd have woken up this morning with the channel 6 feet under, Ofcom pulling the plug, and the government squawking about how there's no place for us in Britain. And getting on to Glastonbury, it's doing more to dumb down society than even social media. Just look at this idiot.
I'm thinking about the people in Palestine. I'm thinking about, and all our governments, like we're from Australia, they ain't doing jack. I know yours ain't doing jack. And I think about schooling and I think about media and I think we don't learn nothing about colonisation. We don't learn nothing about sexual education. We don't learn any of the right things because they don't want us to know and they want us to shut the fuck up.
Yeah, she's not wrong there. For the record, I invited Bob Vylan and its lead singer Pascal Robinson Foster onto the show tonight, and I haven't heard back, of course. But the invitation does still stand. That's if he's got the balls and he's calmed down from trying to be a poor man's Rage Against the Machine. Let's get the thoughts of my panel now. The GBNews contributor Will Kingston, the political commentator Chloe Dobbs, and the former Labour Party advisor Matthew Talbot. Good evening, panel.
Good evening.
Chloe, start with you. Ladies first. What's your take on this nonsense? In fact, for me, the most offensive thing is just what a bloody racket it is.
Yeah, I mean, the BBC, if they're going to say that some people can be platformed and some people can't, then at least be consistent about it. Kneecap, they decided that they're not going to put them on air. If they're going to make decisions about that, why on earth was Bob Vylan allowed on stage? I mean, some of the lyrics that you were reading out there from his past songs are absolutely horrendous. I could give them benefit of the doubt if this guy suddenly started chanting this out of nowhere, and you couldn't have predicted that he was going to start going crazy about Palestine on stage. But actually, if you look at his past, it seems like it's pretty predictable. And then even when they made that mistake, as you say, they didn't cut the feed. And if this was the only mistake that the BBC has made in recent years, then maybe I'd be a bit kinder to them. But I think the Director General, Tim Davie, he has made mistake after mistake after mistake over the past few years, and he's got to go. Yeah,
I think 1,500 breaches of their own guidelines in recent times. Will Kingston, do heads need to roll at the BBC?
Yeah, probably, but I don't think the BBC should be funded at all, so why don't we start there? Look, I've struggled with this all day, Ben, and the reason I've struggled with it is similar to what you said in your intro when you said you're against censorship, and that is there is a world or a country that I would like to live in, and there's the country we actually live in. The country I would like to live in is where free speech is free, with the exceptions of really bad incitement to violence or to defamation. But the problem is we don't live in that country anymore. We live in a country where governments have ruthlessly clamped down on speech. But in a two-tier society, the speech that is clamped down upon is the speech that goes against the prevailing moral zeitgeist, which is leftism. Similarly with the BBC, they clamp down on the speech that goes against the prevailing moral zeitgeist. So the problem for me is not that they broadcast this, it's that they choose to put this stuff on, but then they clamp down on all of the stuff which they find morally disagreeable at the same time.
Yeah, and you know what, I'll say it again, I'm like a broken record. You want to bang Lucy Connolly up for 2.5 years for a tweet that she deleted, then I argue these guys should be banged up for even longer. Matthew Torbett, what's your take on all of this?
On which bit? On them?
Well,
on
the BBC. I mean, look, I'll tell you what my position is. I actually don't think Bob Vylan and the racket they make and the comments they make on stage should be censored. I think if they want to go to Glastonbury to say that kind of stuff, that's fine. I contest the state broadcaster who we pay for broadcasting it for the world to see.
Yeah, and I think there's an argument to be made for that. I think everyone on the panel, I'm a free speech advocate, and if they want to get up on stage and say whatever they want with regards to anything that isn't incitement of racial hatred or violence or defamation, then I think that the thing for the BBC is they don't book the acts.
No, but they can pull the plug.
Yeah. So
they knew about this guy as far back as 2006, as I've just revealed tonight. They were championing Pascal, whatever his name is. You know, they invited them to the studios in 2022 for a performance where they rapped about digging up the grave of Margaret Thatcher. They knew about these people. So they should have been prepared, at least with a delay, or at least been prepared to pull the plug. And I'll say again, if that was GB News, we would be not on air today. You'd have woken up this morning, we'd be finished.
So or if it was a so-called far-right chant, they would have killed the feed immediately.
Go on, Matthew.
So I think if there was a delay, that would be sensible. I think the BBC have always, even with their radio stations, go out live, which I think is always dangerous.
There is a delay.
Depending on who's... Well, Radio 4 have done this before, and they've been caught out by callers who've sworn on air, and actually they've not been able to pull it. So I think what will happen is this is probably around contracting, giving Glastonbury a certain amount of airtime and whatever else. It'll be some rigmarole within the BBC.
Wishy-washy, mate.
They should have been prepared for this. If it was just a few people running the show to broadcast the Glastonbury Festival, then maybe there'd be, you could give them a bit of benefit of doubt for some mistakes, but apparently they've got 900 staff there to put this thing out. Which is, there's also questions to be asked about that, about where your licence fee money is going.
No,
but 900 staff and you can't even be prepared for something going wrong and someone shouting something out.
To play devil's advocate,
someone who's got that much of a track record.
The performance, the sort of acoustic performance they gave in 2022 and the stuff about Thatcher, it's very uncouth, right? It's not nice, not the sort of thing I'd sort of, go to and enjoy, believe it or not. But ultimately, that's up to them to say it. Art, for the want of argument, has always been about pushing boundaries, and we tend to get these moral outrages every so often. It'll be a comedian using ableist language or offensive terms, which we've had with Jimmy Carr and Frankie Boyle in the past. We had the Sex Pistols in the 70s saying the Queen wasn't human and the royal family shouldn't be alive. We've had Eminem banned from the UK early on in his career because of his lyrics were homophobic and potentially racist.
I don't want these guys censored. I'll say it again. I do not want to censor censor people's speech. I'm a free speech absolutist.
So your bugbear is with the
BBC. I do not
out.
want people of this country who are skint already most of the time paying to broadcast this. I was about to say something else. Broadcast this rubbish on air.
And can I add, it is the double standard of the liberal elite thinking that this is acceptable, but then suddenly saying that the speech of people that they find disagreeable isn't acceptable. That is the two-tier nature of speech in this country that people are absolutely fed up with.
Yeah, in fact, not that this is someone working for the BBC, but the BBC had a guest on earlier who then said live on air that they think that Rod Stewart should be banned from performing at Glastonbury because he supports because he supports Nigel Farage. And I'm not saying that's the BBC's view, but what I'm saying is that there is this general movement amongst the left in the UK to think that shouting death to the IDF on stage is acceptable, but supporting Nigel Farage and the Reform Party, which is like the most popular party in the country, nope, absolutely not, can't air that.
I saw the clip. Joy Crooks is, a very good artist and had a joke, right? Also, BBC providing balance for real argument. They've got different opinions. But also, she's saying, let's get rid of Rod Stewart because he supports Nigel Farage. That's so what?
Okay, so just to clarify, Matthew, you don't think anybody should face any consequences from the BBC for what's happened?
No, I didn't say that. I said what would it likely be is they will make an argument over, well, we had to show a certain amount of footage of a certain amount of stages and whatever else. I think they should question whether there should be a delay and therefore this could have been avoided because they could have cut it early potentially. But I imagine there is contractual and legal obligations within Glastonbury and the BBC. That's
I don't want to talk about kneecap too much because of ongoing legal issues, but they were prepared for kneecap.
Yeah, my understanding was they weren't going to show it live because of potential. Yeah.
So why weren't they as prepared for these morons?
Probably because there is a legal case ongoing. I would possibly suggest,
okay.
But I don't know. I'm not the BBC.
OK, panel, thank you. Great start. Let us know what you think at home. GBNews.com/your say. And, there's another clip from Bob Vylan's set at Glastonbury, which I'll show you at 9:30. It was a clip of the lead singer, Pascal Robinson Foster, mocking the fact that many Brits want their country back. I'll play the clip in full. It may infuriate you, but it's definitely interesting to watch and listen to, so stick around for that. Glastonbury Festival has said it's appalled by the statements made by Bob Vylan, Bobby Vylan, of punk duo Bob Vylan. Who are these people?
There's two guys who both call themselves Bobby Vylan, one with a Y and one with an IE.
I'll say again.
Not that those are their real names, it's just a bit confusing.
The most offensive part of all this for me is just the racket they make.
The fact that they think that they're edgy and cool when they are saying all of the stuff that the establishment wants them to say.
Yeah, we are giving them what they want because they've had airtime all weekend, and the problem is, very quickly, the same as the Sex Pistols, once you make martyrs of these people, they actually become more popular and sell more records, and this is the danger we have.
And also, mate, you're from Suffolk. You're from Ipswich, right? Glastonbury Festival said it's appalled by the statements made by Bobby Vylan of punk duo Bob Vylan during their set on Saturday. A post on Instagram said, as a festival, we stand against all forms of war and terrorism. We'll always believe in and actively campaign for hope, unity, peace and love. With almost 4,000 performances at Glastonbury 2025, there will inevitably be artists and speakers appearing on our stages whose views we do not share, and a performer's presence here should never be seen as a tacit endorsement of their opinions and beliefs. And a BBC spokesperson has said some of the comments made during Bob Vylan's performance were deeply offensive. During this live stream on iPlayer, which reflected what was happening on stage, a warning was issued on screen about the very strong and discriminatory language. We have no plans to make the performance available on demand. Right, there we go.